Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Established Run's NBA Injury Report Analysis Show. I'm Drew Dinkmeyer here with Mike Gallagher to walk you through tonight's 11-game slate in the association. As always with the NBA, plenty of injury notes to cover. With me to do it, as always, is Mike Gallagher. Mike, how are you doing?
Doing good, yes. CLV's been running pretty hot. Been getting a lot of injury news, and it's been working out. Which for the hashtag 20 after gang, if you're in the streets, you had a pretty good weekend. But yeah, I'm excited for a really big slate today. That not too much injury news, but should be fun to break down.
Yeah, let's get to it. Let's start with Brooklyn and Charlotte at the top of the schedule there. On the Brooklyn side, lots of names on the injury report today. Armani Brooks, Noah Clowney, Dariq Whitehead, Jalen Wilson, they're all out, but they're not the names we're really focused on. It's Nick Claxton and Cam Johnson. We saw Brooklyn without these two players over the weekend, and they went really small in a matchup against Dallas. Day'Ron Sharpe, their normal backup center, only played 3 minutes in the game that Nick Claxton was out. Dorian Finney-Smith, as you correctly predicted, slid into that starting lineup, played 32 minutes. They played really tight. I mean, this was like an almost playoff rotation, right? 6 guys playing 32 plus minutes and then just a couple spare minutes afterwards. What are your expectations for how they look tonight with this same group of available players?
So part of the reason why I felt so confident that Dorian was going to start at the 5 was the matchup. So a little bit different here. You got Mark Williams. They're still going to run a pretty pick and roll heavy scheme. I still think that they're big enough with Ben and Dorian still being, bigger at their position. I think they could still run it, so I'd expect them to still start. But they might run it a little bit bigger as far as more guys getting double-digit minutes, and then just bigger overall with, Day'Ron Sharpe probably playing a little bit more. Don't expect him to play a lot. Certainly Cam Thomas, I think he's third in the NBA in scoring, has just been out of this world to start the year. They have to play him a lot. And then, as you kind of alluded to there, the Jacques divide these minutes up. Vaughn didn't really do that. He ran them pretty tight. Freaking Spencer getting 40. They thought they played Mikal too much. They played him 35 again. So, yeah, we should feel pretty confident this team's going to have, pretty good amount of minutes, not back-to-back, had some rest as well. So, I think we could probably expect, pretty heavy minutes against a Hornets team that is, especially when LaMelo plays, could give up some points. So after kind of freaking out on Friday, we're kind of feeling pretty good about these Nets players again.
If Day'Ron Sharpe was to play a more substantial role, let's say even like the normal backup role, like 14 to 18 minutes or something like that, who do you think minutes come from first in that scenario?
I think Lonnie, he's kind of clearly the last-ish guy in if you're not going to count Dennis Smith Jr. I think they still want to get Dennis in there, especially if, against the guard-heavy attack in Rozier and LaMelo. So I think Lonnie's minutes are coming down. We have Day'Ron at 14 minutes, so we're expecting him again. The matchup, they're going to run pretty much true fives most of the time. We saw Charlotte, we could transition to them here. We saw them run a little bit small ball, but they both had, their two centers had fouls. So, but yeah, I expect them to play a little bit bigger with Lonnie's minutes coming down. And we'll see if we can't expect Spencer to get 40 as well. So probably a little on him as well.
So you think Dorian Finney-Smith and Royce O'Neal would still be fairly secure for minutes into the 30s?
Yeah, I think so. They really like Royce off the bench. Usually, even before these injuries, he's usually one of the first subs in there. So should feel pretty good about those guys.
Great. Let's move to Charlotte, where James Bouknight, Cody Martin, Frank Ntilikina all remain out. Miles Bridges still dealing with league suspension. But Bryce McGowan's no longer on the injury report. They've played a pretty solid 9-man rotation so far to start the season. Do you expect to see Bryce McGowan's crack that rotation, or are we still good with the 9-man rotation, which is really kind of leaning into largely, 6+ guys. I guess 7 guys if you count Richards. Williams is like kind of a center combo, but Brandon Miller's had a really nice roll off the bench so far.
Yeah, they've been running really big lineups. They've been running PJ at the 3. But to answer the McGowan's question, I think he's kind of been Wally pipped here. They like Taylor Maladon. We saw Maladon, league-winning good kind of role to close last year when they were really banged up. But, taking all those LaMelo minutes, and then LaMelo's minutes come up. So it was kind of just a one-game thing, I think, for him. So expect him to be in the mid-30s there. A lot of fouls in this game here, too. Mark Williams, I mentioned that a second ago. Mark Williams and Nick Richards both had some fouls. PJ Washington was in some foul trouble, so that helped JT Thor's minutes and also helped Miller's minutes a little bit. But, I expect this rotation to basically run it back until further notice.
All right, let's move to Celtics and Washington. On the Celtics side, nothing to really talk about here. They're out guys, they're two-way guys, so we can Niemis Queta, so I don't think we need to talk about anything there. Washington side, Daniel Gafford listed questionable with a left ankle sprain. This was, one of the concerns for Washington coming into the season is there's not a lot of front court depth on this team in general, and Daniel Gafford is not a very durable guy. So when Gafford plays, the permanent stuff is going to be pretty good. We'll see how long he can stay out of foul trouble, how long he can stay healthy. Third game of the season, and we're dealing with a questionable tag with an ankle sprain. Not great. What do you think the likelihood of Gafford suiting up tonight is? And if he's unable to go, what do we see from Washington in his absence?
Yeah, probably closer to doubtful here, right? Didn't practice, pretty legit ankle sprain. He actually played pretty well to beat the Grizzlies, who are just terrible. I'm going to probably bet against the Grizzlies really anytime I want with how poorly they've been playing. But I think they would go Muscala starting here. We know Gallinari has been kind of subbing in behind Gafford. That's been a trend really throughout the preseason, but I think they like him off the bench. And yeah, I think you're going to want a little bit more size. Just a terrible, terrible matchup here. Probably hitting this. Hope maybe I'll probably try to catch it live and try to catch like a 6-point spread, but Boston's going to freaking just destroy them. They've only allowed 24 points per game at the rim. That's like 10 points better than league average, league best last year, excuse me. So, but yeah, I think Muscala probably starts here, and we'll probably get game time on Gafford, or he might even get ruled out before warmups.
And we've seen the Gafford, Gallinari, Muscala combo sort of combine for about 48, just generally. The Celtics are a team you can play a little bit smaller against if they wanted to. Anthony Gill is a guy that they've used in the past for bigger wing scorers and whatnot. If they're without Gafford, I'm guessing you do not think Gallinari Muscala would combine for a full 48 in that instance, or am I off there?
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, they might bring Gill, and then we know Eugene Omoyuri has been playing some small ball 5 for the Pistons, so I think he would be someone we'd probably give minutes. But they wouldn't really be. I don't think Muscala would be like a great play for a DFS punt or anything like that. And Gal, I just don't think is capable of playing like mid 20s minutes.
They probably top out at like 45, 46 in the best case scenarios, right? And then the floor case scenarios on the combination of those two is probably like 38 to 40, right? There's some scenarios where like each guy struggles to get to 20. And they're forced to kind of lean into other groupings. I mean, obviously Gallinari is already a smallish 5 option, so they would be open to using other smallish 5 options. But just want to talk through those minutes because I do think it's something that might pop up as like looking like really good value on the slate later today.
Yeah, and we saw a little bit of Kuzma at the 5 last year too, and they're more desperate now than they were there. So I think that makes sense. That would also get cool. You're a front court of Koulibaly, Kuzma, and Denny, is kind of mixed in. I think makes a ton of sense there. So, it pretty much covers it. Yeah.
Yeah, enough athleticism and size. And remember the opponent here. Boston's not huge. I mean, they're big, but they're like big every position but center, right? And then they're tall. They're tall at center, but they're not like bulky big. So I think it's a team that you can get away with playing a little bit smaller against. Obviously, they're going to have their struggles regardless because of the talent gap. Let's move.
Wouldn't be surprised if they start Koulibaly. We saw them start Koulibaly for Kuzma, and I think that makes sense. Kuzma's kind of got enough size to guard KP. You would think too.
I could see that too, and then have Muscala like kind of match Horford minutes. Like I could see something like that. So it wouldn't surprise me either on that front. Koulibaly, really interesting defensive profile and whatnot. If he ended up being like super chalk in defense, I would be really nervous about getting excited about that. His offensive game is really, really limited. Let's move to Chicago and Indiana. On the Chicago side, Zach LaVine, who cares about back spasms, right? Was game time decision last game over the weekend on a back-to-back, ends up going out playing, scoring 51 points in a game. The Bulls scored 102 points. So he had half of their entire offensive output, shooting the ball really well, 19 for 33 overall, 7 for 13 from 3. He's on the injury report again, probable with a bilateral low back spasms, or actually on the injury report, it says spams. The other players listed out here for Chicago, nobody to, really of mention. It's just the G League guys, Dalen Terry, Justin Lewis. So it's really just the probable tag on Zach LaVine it was a probable tag that got upgraded to questionable over the weekend, which is always concerning, but then he played through it and played really, really well. So what are your thoughts on Zach LaVine tonight?
Should be good, especially you go out there and get downgrade. Downgrade to questionable is usually mean you're missing. He goes out there and drops freaking 50. So yeah, I expect him to play pretty well. And the Bulls are kind of keeping their word on the 3-point shooting. The volume wasn't really there, but their catch and shoot volume is way up. I think they're 8th in the NBA in catch and shoot attempts this year. So that preseason buzz is from a play type standpoint is kind of working. Obviously, Patrick Williams' minutes are just so shaky, especially in really any matchup. But and we'll talk about the Pacers in a second, I guess. But they're going to need to play really, really fast. The Pacers are by far the fastest offense in the NBA, and they're the best offense in the NBA. They're just scoring a ton of points, small sample size, but they're going to need as much defense as they can get from Chicago side.
On the Indiana side, nothing on the injury report that's super notable. Their G Leaguers are all listed questionable. Are there any rotation notes you wanted to get into on Indiana before we move on?
No, just we kind of saw this. They lengthened the rotation. That was kind of the big note. I think that was partly because Halliburton had an illness, but played through it, played pretty well. I mentioned this offense is just completely clicking. But we know Nesmith is playing a lot. Nesmith played really well, and he really hurt Obi Toppin. I wouldn't really freak out about that. But yeah, I think that the Pacers, which we've been talking about really since July, that we expect this Pacers offense to really, really crush. So it should be really fantasy friendly.
Yeah. A couple of really favorable matchups for them to start the year with Washington, and then a Cleveland team without Jared Allen, without Darius Garland, without Donovan Mitchell. So they've run a little hot schedule-wise. Benny Mathurin and Obi Toppin both seen their minutes kind of crater as the second unit got hot. A little bit concerning just long-term in terms of their ceilings. And this is, remember, this is without Jarris Walker, earning minutes or competing at this point. So Aaron Nesmith playing really well. Buddy Hield is a good bench option. It's going to be, a little bit volatile with some of the starters minutes. Outside of, it looks like Bruce Brown, who they really trust, they've gave him a ton of money, Miles Turner and Tyrese Halliburton. Like, those guys look pretty locked in. But the last two, it's going to be a little bit of a hot hand situation. Okay, let's move to the Wolves and the Hawks. Wolves side of things, Jaden McDaniels listed questionable on the injury report, along with Shake Milton. They're without Leonard Miller and Wendell Moore Jr. on G League assignment. McDaniels has not been able to play yet this year, was hurt in the preseason, so has been dealing with this calf strain for a while. Do you expect him to be available tonight and return? And if so, how would that impact the Minnesota rotation?
So we went through practice. That's a pretty good sign. But as I'm trying to pull something up here, let's see if I can get it. We are on #TheWatch. And it looks like, one second here. Looks like Nickeil Alexander-Walker's got a starter's jersey on. So maybe they bring McDaniels off the bench. Certainly expecting to be limited, calf strains. They need a ramp-up period. He did hurt it in the first game of the preseason in Abu Dhabi, so he's had like 4 weeks to heal. But I would expect him to have a minutes limit. We know this guy could be kind of shaky on minutes, but I kind of expect Nah to get the start against and they would need that defense, I think, too. So I think Nah starts, and I think that there's a little bit of a minutes limit on Jaden if he can go, but I do think he's going to give it a go.
And then Shake Milton, any notes on his availability tonight?
No, I haven't really seen much, but they would just run McLaughlin in there. So we'll kind of keep an eye on that. But we're pretty much just going to give the minutes to McLaughlin in that situation. Maybe they've actually run Nickeil Alexander-Walker as a one at times, so he may benefit minutes that way too.
Yeah, and that would be a way to get a lot of on-ball defense on the floor together if you could get Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Jaden McDaniels on the floor at the same time against the Hawks' potent backcourt. Let's move to the Hawks, where they're on the second end of a back-to-back after a big win in Milwaukee last night. Wesley Matthews listed out with the calf strain. No other real big news on the Hawks. They did shift to Jalen Johnson starting yesterday instead of Sadiq Bey, but the minutes were still very split between these two. And I think really the roles are really solid. We talked about this last week between DeAndre Hunter, Jalen Johnson, Sadiq Bey. It seems like every game you're going to have two of the three guys in like the 25 to 30 range, and maybe one guy spikes up to like 31, 32. But I don't think you're going to see them very often have like two of those three guys below 25. I think they're just really trust these guys. So Jalen Johnson might have been matchup driven with the matchup against Giannis in the front court here against Milwaukee. matchup against Minnesota would dictate something similar. So I'd probably expect Jalen Johnson to draw the start again. Any other notes on Atlanta here?
Yeah, just AJ Griffin getting cut. You see 10 minutes on the screen, but he didn't get in the rotation until the second half. So, and we talked about this on Friday that he's like distant ninth. So we'll see. I think that on a back to back they would increase him here. So I think he is going to get rotation minutes just because the back to back factor there. But yeah, and I also expect Jalen Johnson to start. Why wouldn't you? You go out there and get a big road win. Sure, Middleton didn't play, but and we've seen this all season. There are some quotes from Snyder saying they're going to have a quote malleable rotation, but I think Johnson's kind of #earned it.
Yep. Let's move to Portland, who's had kind of a crazy schedule to start. They're on the second night of a back-to-back here, so Robert Williams is going to rest tonight. Anthony Simons is out 4 to 6 weeks with that right thumb ligament tear, so he's out. Ish Wainwright also listed out. I noticed Portland played, I think they played Friday night at home, then Sunday in Philadelphia, and they started on the road. I think they played in the Clippers. So they went Clippers to Portland to Philadelphia to Toronto. Really strange and difficult travel schedule to start the season. They have performed as poorly as you could possibly expect. Without Time Lord in there tonight, how does that shake things up for the Portland rotation?
So, and they also don't have Duop Breath. He's on a G League assignment. He's kind of been running as their number 2 center. So I think they're going to run small. In the second unit, we saw a decent bit of Jabari Walker and Tumani Kamara 4-5 combos. I think that makes a ton of sense with Boucher probably being the second unit on the other side, which we'll get to. So, yeah, we saw Walker kind of move into rotation, which we kind of saw coming with Ant Simons, because I was surprised he was kind of out of the rotation in the first game. So, yeah, they'll run the same starting lineup. Maybe Ayton could actually play minutes and actually play well in them. I kind of don't think so. And then Matisse Thybulle's minutes should be a little bit higher. Shout out to us for a really good bet on him. But Kamara's locked in, and I've been talking up Kamara a lot since summer. He's just like balling, man. Obviously this is kind of a low key dork NBA nerd thing, but the guy's earning a lot of minutes, and I expect him to play a pretty good bit today. He's big enough to play plenty of 4.
So you're not expecting a big role increase from Moses Brown?
I'm not. We have him at 8 minutes, and I don't think he's a lock. We're being, too matchup-y, but I think he's like 50-50 to get the non-Aytons. That's kind of where we got it minutes wise.
Okay, interesting. Let's move to the Toronto side of things. Perhaps this influences it, but Precious Achiuwa is listed as doubtful with the left groin strain, so they're a little bit thinner in the front court. They're without Christian Koloko as well, who's out with an illness due to a respiratory issue. And then OG Anunoby is questionable here. This is an interesting questionable tag because he was questionable on Saturday with this same like leg muscle cramp thing, which you don't usually see muscle cramp as a thing on an injury report. And then he warmed up and it sounded like he was going to play and he was late scratch. And he's still on the injury report a few days later for the same thing, which is just strange because cramping, as somebody who dealt with a ton of cramps playing tennis growing up and struggled with it, is like it's usually just a one-time thing. And then you rehydrate over time, you get yourself, and it's not something 3 days later. So this is an interesting injury report note. I have been expecting teams to be a little bit more conservative on resting guys against Portland because Portland's so bad, but we saw Joel Embiid play last night. I think it was the home opener for Philly, which might have played a role in that. OG Anunoby tonight, what are your thoughts on his availability?
Yeah, Darko said he was going to play and then gets the downgrade kind of out of the blue. So yeah, warmed up, didn't have it. I'd mentioned, I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen anybody miss a game, to start. Obviously players go out in mid game, but quite baffling. So I think he's going to play. But I thought he was going to play last time. Coach said he was going to play. So I think he's in. We'll see if they watch his minutes. Maybe he's getting plenty of bananas and potassium and all that stuff. But yeah, expect him to go. Again, maybe not the high end minutes, just given the way this shook out. And then replacing Precious, it's going to be Boucher. We saw Boucher kind of get booted out, and they were running him just a little bit more of a 5 than a 4 than Nick Nurse did. So I expect Boucher pretty much to get the non-portals, which slightly helps. Malachi Flynn get in there, and then obviously Trent Jr. would have a pretty decent bench role, probably in the high 20s, filling in again. If OG's a little bit limited, that could help him, and then we'd probably see McDaniels sneak in the rotation as well there. But and then Grady Dick should probably be in the rotation too with Boucher playing straight 5.
A little surprising Jalen McDaniels has fallen so far, but
Yeah.
it is what it is here with Toronto. But an opportunity tonight if OG was unavailable. Let's move to Dallas and Memphis. Dallas, nothing on the injury report to tackle, so I don't think there's anything really there to touch on. Memphis.
I could talk Lively really quick because Lively minutes were really late. There was commentary from Jason Kidd saying that he struggled with the small ball lineups. So not the case here. So I think Lively's minutes should rebound in this spot.
Okay. And then on the Memphis side of things, still no Santi Aldama, no Steven Adams, no Brandon Clark, no Luke Kennard, and no John Morant. So they remain very, very shorthanded. We saw the road loss to Washington. Heavy minutes for Zaire Williams, who's been, kind of the bright spot in what's been a really dark start to the season. Desmond Bane with another big role once again. Jaren Jackson struggling to capitalize from a fantasy perspective on the big role, while Xavier Tillman battled foul trouble in this game. Any notes on Memphis from a rotation perspective to consider for tonight?
No, just that John Conchar kind of came out of nowhere. We saw that personal issue that cost him preseason games, cost him the opener, and he's back full role when he returns. Second game gets pretty decent role there. So, yeah, I feel like we've got this rotation pretty much pegged, and they're going to just need a lot of scoring. Dallas has been putting up some offense, and this team's bombing threes is another thing that's kind of stood out. With some, not as much pace. They've been playing in the half court way too much. So, clearly missing John Morant for how they like to play.
Yeah, playing in the half court a little bit more. And then also they don't have guys that can really break you down off the dribble and finish at the rim, right? Like the one guy that they have that can do that is Desmond Bane. After that, like Marcus Smart notoriously, like when he gets into the paint, he's usually looking to pass. So it's a lot of like kick out, catch and shoot, contested three stuff, which is why their offense has struggled so much to start. Let's move to Detroit and Oklahoma City. On the Detroit side, no Bojan Bogdanovic, no Monty Morris, no Isaiah Livers as expected. James Weissman on the injury report listed as available. He has not been in the rotation. So don't think there's anything to cover here on the Detroit side. Any rotation notes you want to share in Detroit?
No, not really. Just, Jalen Duren's been freaking awesome, man. Leading the NBA in boards. Their rim defense has been insanely good. Like they've been, elite. If it wasn't for Boston, they'd have like the best rim defense. Sure, their matchup definitely matters, but we used to be. I would cover Detroit Piston opponents like half the time, and their defense has been really, really good. So credit to Weissman, credit to Asar Thompson. He's been fantastic as an on-ball defender. Not so much last night, but he's looked really good. Cade looks like he's back. Stewart's been pretty good as a floor spacer and creating some rebounds as well. Killian Hayes has been playing well. But the Pistons, they're 2-1 and they're playing pretty good basketball right now.
Yeah, they've opted for a more defensive heavy lineup with Killian Hayes, with Oscar Thompson in that starting lineup, Isaiah Stewart as well. They have not so far been put to the test in terms of that team, that lineup struggling for offense. That's the real question mark long term. It's because Jalen Duren's been so efficient to start the season and Cade's been pretty good that they haven't run into those issues. But that's the question long term: is there enough offense in that lineup? We'll see as they start playing some tougher competition as well. It's been a fairly soft start to the schedule so far. They play at OKC tonight. OKC on the second leg of a back-to-back here. They got rolled by the champs yesterday in what, any concerns about Denver, like taking the regular season lightly or slow start or whatever, that would have been the spot. The Sunday afternoon road game against OKC, that kind of would have been the spot. And they just rolled them. They were in control the whole time. Jokic toyed with Chet on the offensive end, which look, he toys with everybody. So no disrespect to Chet there. There's no filing for the Thunder on the injury report. I don't think there's anything to really worry about on the second night of back-to-back after they got blown out, but just any notes you want to have on the Thunder here.
I guess Chet, right? Coming off a season where he missed all his games.
Yeah.
Maybe they manage him here. That's probably the only thing we're going to watch. But other than that, should expect a pretty similar rotation. We did see Alexei Pokashevsky get in there and get rotation minutes. That was a bit of a surprise. And then, Misic and all these guys. And Casey Wallace can't miss. The guy's been playing really, really well. And but other than that, I think we've mostly got this rotation. I'm curious to see if Poku plays in the back-to-back too. He might sit, given he's had a couple injuries leading up to the season.
Speaking of back-to-backs, we've got the Warriors at the Pelicans, the Warriors on a back-to-back, the Warriors specifically in New Orleans. I seem to remember last year, both trips to New Orleans were mass rest situations. So it's funny that the first back-to-back of the season once again comes in New Orleans here. I don't know what the schedule makers have with with this being a spot for the Warriors back-to-backs, but they've got one. Last night, you look at those minutes kind of across the board, though. Draymond Green returns, and I think this is sort of interesting to follow and see if this happens. It's not going to happen with all teams. We saw like the Kings and the Lakers last night. Lakers on a front end of back-to-back, huge minutes for the Lakers main guys. We'll get to that in a bit. But this was not really full bore minutes for the Warriors. And you wonder if the new rest rules, if the requirements are going to have impacts like this, where guys who you normally would expect for 34, 35 are more like 30, 31 to try to get them through 2 games in these spots. Was that at all in your mind or takeaway when watching or looking at this box score? We don't have an injury report filed for them yet, so we don't have any information yet on the Warriors.
I think they're Kerr said they're planning to play their guys. I don't know if Draymond's included in that, coming off a pretty severe ankle sprain. I think he could certainly sit, but it sounds like, as you mentioned, not a lot of minutes. I think that they're. I mean, we got to take the coach's word, right, for now, that they're going to have their guys. But yeah, it sounds like they're going to keep Chris Paul in the bench role. We'll see if that changes if someone's sitting, but yeah, pretty good win. And they were really just in control most of the game in Houston. And, not too far of a trip to go from Houston to New Orleans as well.
No. So Dre, you don't think you'll just continue to be on a minutes restriction, and then Steph and Clay would be the guys we'd be more concerned about from a rest perspective, right?
Yeah, I think so. But I think that I'm gonna believe Steve Kerr for now. So we'll see. But okay. Hopefully we just get. No Q tags. We don't want to play the Q tag game.
Yeah. Let's move to New Orleans. Nothing really of note here. Najee Marshall, Trey Murphy, Jose Alvarado, all still out. Any rotation notes you have for New Orleans?
No, I think we could kind of move on.
Okay, let's move to Milwaukee and Miami. On the Miami side, a full injury report as usual. Haywood Highsmith is out. Caleb Martin is doubtful. Josh Richardson is questionable. Bam Adebayo is questionable. Jaime Jaquez Jr. is available. Kevin Love is probable. Duncan Robinson is available. So we hit every possible tag that you could have. Shout out to Miami for hitting for the cycle on this one across the team. The biggest question marks there would be Bam Adebayo and Josh Richardson in terms of how Josh Richardson would impact minutes here. But obviously a really thin Miami team off to a 1-2 start. They're going into Milwaukee. Milwaukee's on the second night of back-to-back after getting embarrassed last night. This is a tough start to the year for Miami. And if they're without Bam Adebayo, how would things look?
Yeah, they played Saturday, and it was obvious rest spot here. Hashtag 20 after did quite well with the Wolves -4.5 there. But yeah, I don't know about Bam. Downgrade, not great. Josh Richardson, upgrade. It sounded like he had actually a chance to play late last week. Obviously, he was ruled out, but I expect him to be out there. Maybe minutes limit from an injury that happened, I think, the second to last game of the preseason. So we'll see if he starts. We know that was a big thing going into the year. Myself and Fan and most people had expected him to start, despite what Kyle Lowry's saying. So I think they'd probably bring him off the bench. So I think if Bam goes, they would start Bam, Hero, Lowry, Jimmy, and then Kevin Love, who more or less sat out for rest, I would say. It was a shoulder injury they listed him with. But and they'll probably still play Jaime Jaquez Jr. Quite clear he's on a minutes limit. Both comments from Spoelstra, which stuck, and they started him, which kind of surprised me. And they kept his minutes down. But yeah, I think that's mostly, obviously, if Bam doesn't go, A, that would be really bad. And B, they would probably start Thomas Bryant in the first unit, and just a really bad spot against the Bucks team. It should probably eat in the paint.
Do you think Thomas Bryant would get full minutes there, or what would your expectations be? Because Thomas Bryant's been a good fantasy point per minute producer in his career, so I'm sure he would draw attention. I'm sure he's close to min price. But what do you think the minutes range on Thomas Bryant if Bam Adebayo was out? What do you think that range would be like tonight?
I'd say probably 18 to 28. So he'd probably have him in the mid-20s for minutes.
Yeah.
Do we know Kevin Love plays some center? They do have Orlando Robinson, give him some size, a little bit of spacing as well. So, and Thomas Bryant could space too. So it's an okay matchup from him for how he can hold up as far as needing his role. But it could be bad. It could be tough against the Bucks size.
Yep. Milwaukee side of things, they are on a back-to-back here, but we did get an injury report from them. Marjon Beauchamp listed out with illness. How does that impact the Bucks rotation?
Yeah, so we're gonna get Middleton back, so that's pretty good. And it looked like that they were gonna be having him out of the rotation, especially earlier. He was kind of not subbed in the opener until the second quarter, but has run pretty good. So they'll miss him. They're just gonna run it bigger. I would say this pretty much locks in Robin Lopez's spot, as they would run Bobby Portis as a little bit more of a 4 than a 5. So I think that's how they would address it. So obviously you got the same starting lineup: Connaughton, Campaign, Portis. And then Crowder would move back to the bench as well, so they'd still have 10. We'd probably run the 10th man being Rolo at 8-9 minutes, but they could run a little bit tighter. Tougher to do in the back-to-back though.
It does seem like minutes from last night were exaggerated due to a blowout and whatnot, but it seems like you can kind of just sub Beauchamp's minutes out for Middleton. Middleton's going to be in the mid-20s, right, and just kind of expect generally that to be the main impact from things.
We just got the Warriors. It's just got Klay Thompson questionable, and then Draymond is probable. So
okay.
Let's see what's up with obviously, if Klay's out, they would probably just start Chris Paul.
Yeah. Yep. That would make sense. And Moses Moody and Gary Payton would probably have expanded roles there. Moody probably more so, just because Payton on a back-to-back, they might be a little bit gun shy on as well. Utah and Denver. Utah, very full injury report here. Ochai Agbaji listed questionable. Taylor Hendricks, Johnny Juzang, Micah Porter, Bryce Sensabaugh, all out G League two-way guys. So it's really just Agbaji from a, actually in the rotation standpoint here. His role has kind of been a little bit diminished by Keontae George's really strong start to the season. And Agbaji's kind of had a tough time fitting in. They thought early in camp, maybe he'll fit in the guard bucket. Then later in camp, he kind of went into the forward bucket, and he's just kind of had a hard go of it in terms of finding spots. So how do you think Agbaji, if he's unable to go, how do you think that would impact the Jazz rotation tonight?
Yeah, it just helps the guards out a little bit. Would kind of lock in Chris Dunn's minutes. Keontae George, again, he has closed this gap quick. Less than a week. We're almost talking about, Will Hardy said that they wanted to go 10 games with this lineup. I don't know if Horton Tucker is going to make it 10 with the way that Keontae George has been coming for his minutes. But yeah, and then the other thing too, man, Walker Kessler's minutes have been really bad. He can't close as much. John Collins, we kind of thought that John Collins would get the short end of the stick compared to Walker Kessler. It's been the other way around, as John Collins has really damped down the Walker Kessler stuff. And then Keontae George, again, these guard minutes are starting to tighten up. Chris, I don't think Colin Sexton's minutes are going to be there as well, but we're going to be watching how much longer Taylor Horton Tucker could hold him off. And then one other thing to note, oh boy, their defense is bad. They are dead last in the NBA in defensive rating and 126 points per 100. They're dead last in offensive rating, 114 points per 100 in half court. That is absurd. So they need help quick. And against a Suns team that was really shorthanded, right? So for them to be this bad this often is kind of scary for a team that was, really the big surprise. We thought we had, we were counting our chickens before they hatched, and we got those 30.5 under wins, and that got wrecked. Yeah. But this is looking like the team that we kind of thought it was going to be last year.
Yeah, they look really, really bad, and these box scores are exactly the type of DFS hell that I anticipated coming into the season. These mid-20s for everybody is just not fun. So, and you get a little bit of blowout risk tonight, having to travel to Denver to play the Champs. Now the Champs are on a back-to-back. Did they file at 2:30? Because I do not have the 2:30 in front of me.
I will check right now, but they should. Actually, they have another hour to do it with the game.
Okay, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. So I don't think there'll be anything to worry about with the Nuggets. They handled things pretty comfortably yesterday. It was also an afternoon game, so the gap between the time that the games are played is a little bit wider. The travel issue isn't as bad. So I don't expect to see anything pop up on that injury report for Denver, but we'll just note that it is a back-to-back for them.
Yep, they did not file. They'll be in an hour. So if you want to try to see if they're sitting, but again, we're not expecting to sit. But always be ready at 28 after for the injury report.
Yep. Orlando and the Lakers, the last one here, and this is one we will want to be ready for the 28 after. On the Orlando side, nothing to worry about here. They are on the front end of a back-to-back, I will note. So you might see kind of more balanced minutes on the whole, but really, I don't have any notes on Orlando. Do you?
Nope. Okay. They've been running this rotation out pretty solid, so there's really nothing to take away from. Just as you mentioned, the front end could be something to watch.
Lakers side, though, back end of a back-to-back after an overtime game. they were just talking about managing LeBron James minutes as of 2 games ago. You got to think there's a really high probability that LeBron James doesn't go tonight, possibly a really high probability that Anthony Davis is also rested in this spot tonight. It's tough for them because this is a game that on the schedule, you would think like Orlando at home, this is a good opportunity to get a W. But coming off of this, second night of back-to-back with the starters playing so much last night, this is definitely a rest risk spot for Anthony Davis and LeBron James. Why don't you talk through some of the different options who would potentially benefit in different scenarios here? Because I don't think we'll know in an hour, but I hope we'll know in an hour. My concern is we might even get like questionable tags, which would just be a disaster because this game is an hour and a half after all the other games on the slate. So what are your thoughts on the Lakers tonight and what to expect?
I mean, they're just going to roll LeBron out, right? I mean, overtime game, so. 39 minutes, up-tempo game. He's got to be a big dog to play tonight. So I think that will get Rui Hachimura in the first unit. We'll see a little bit more. I would even say a lot more of Christian Wood. That could be a pretty sneaky play. Although Orlando's defense has been freaking amazing. I believe they're first, well, at least on the synergy stuff, they're first in defense. They're great rim defense. They've been just taking care of teams. Certainly the schedule helped them tremendously, but I have been impressed with how they've been handling ball handlers. So AD, I think coin flip, definitely I think a chance he sits. I think they would start Jackson Hayes. Again, that would really benefit Christian Wood. I could see Christian Wood having a pretty big role tonight. And then also the commentary from Darvin Ham saying that they're going to, possibly tighten up the rotation, possibly change the starting lineup, which, that's kind of built in, I guess, if they're going to miss people. But, pretty tough way to go. They look like they were going to have a nice little comeback late in this game. But, credit to De'Aaron Fox, too. He's going to miss time. And he goes out there and freaking, has a really strong finish to the game. But, and should imagine the Austin Reeves minutes have been going quite poorly for a guy that had all the buzz in the world. He has lost it all with how poorly they've been playing in the Reeves minutes.
Yeah, it's been real bad. I do think if LeBron and AD were to sit tonight, we would get a healthy dosage of Reeves and Russell from a ball handling perspective. That would be intriguing, certainly from DFS perspective, maybe an opportunity for them to kind of find their way. But man, this is a situation to obviously pay attention to because LeBron and AD soak up so much fantasy production. If they are out, that opens up the door for a lot of fantasy production from other guys. The guys who usually would benefit in these situations are guys that can take and absorb usage. So you think of D'Angelo Russell, Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, Christian Wood. You think of those guys as guys if in scenarios we're talking where both guys sit. And guys like Taurean Prince, who certainly would benefit in terms of having a bigger role in different things like that, might not benefit as much as those other guys because Taurean Prince is really getting a lot of great looks from the attention that LeBron James and from the creation that LeBron James brings for him. So just be mindful of like who would kind of benefit most in these situations. Before we get out of here, because that is the last game on slate, let's roll through the other updates for the 2:30 injury report, which includes Kyrie Irving listed as questionable tonight for Dallas. Obviously, if Kyrie's unable to go, that's going to make Luka even more enticing as a play naturally. But we've seen like Dante Exum jump Jaden Hardy. Would that still be the case in a situation without Kyrie Irving? What are your thoughts there if Kyrie's unable to go for Dallas tonight?
I feel pretty confident that they would start Josh Green at the 2. We saw him start in a preseason game on the wing there, so I think he would start. That would help Derek Jones Jr.'s minutes a little bit, not having to have to compete with Josh Green for 3 minutes. So he would benefit. Obviously, Tim Hardaway Jr., they like him off the bench. He would be in a really, really big role, would get a ton of minutes. He'd be a guy we'd certainly be looking at as well. And then, I think Dante Exum's minutes would be in there. Seth Curry, we project for minutes for sure. And we probably wouldn't project much for Hardy. We'd probably give him 10 minutes if Kyrie did sit. Obviously, midday downgrade, probably thinking Kyrie's got a decent chance to sit here for a guy that's, missed a lot of time in his career. And then I mentioned, Derek Lively's minutes, I think, could be a little bit more secure from, just maybe playing Kleber as more of a 4 as well.
Yeah. And I'll just note from, obviously, I don't think you're going to get particularly great odds on Luka for like MVP or anything like this, but Luka's numbers are going to be really, really outrageous this year if he's able to stay healthy. Because you look at this lineup, we know Kyrie Irving has a hard time, playing 60, 70 games in a year. And they're just not guys who can eat up possessions. Like every possession is, which look, this is going to wear down Luka. This is what happens every year. Luka gets off to these incredible starts, and then he's being asked to play 36 minutes, have a 40% usage rate, a 50% assist rate, and like do everything, and then he wears down. And so that's probably what's going to happen again. But if he is somehow able to stay healthy, the numbers he is going to finish with this year are going to be eye-popping and outrageous from a volume perspective. So like we remember Russ's like triple-double years as being like crazy. Luka could be like that with like 40 points a game, like 38 points a game, something like that, because everything has to run through him. It's really, really ridiculous right now. So as long as he's healthy from a DFS perspective, expect really big things from Luka right now. The role is just outrageous, incomparable. Nobody else in the league has anything like it. Okay, and then in addition to Draymond Green, Jonathan Kuminga was on the injury report. Draymond Green and Clay. Jonathan Kuminga was on the injury report as questionable for Golden State. He was questionable yesterday, was able to play through it, got into some early foul trouble, did some Kuminga things out there. He actually dribbled the ball straight out of bounds on one play, which I was watching him and like, it's like a golden retriever. Like sometimes you're really excited about them and sometimes they're just like over there pooping in the corner. And so Kuminga questionable tag today with Draymond Green, probable tag with Klay Thompson, questionable tag. The one thing I'll note is that they seem to really have a lot more confidence in Kuminga than ever before. And it seems to be really hurting Andrew Wiggins in a really big way. Mm-hmm. So if Kuminga was, sitting for any reason whatsoever, I think you could get a little bit more optimistic on Andrew Wiggins, but it's been a very difficult start to the season for Andrew Wiggins.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think that they would bring in Corey Joseph as well. Matchup, right? Do they care about rim defense enough where they would bring in possibly Trace Jackson Davis to play a little bit bigger? We saw him sneak in there in the Kings game. So I think his minutes could be sneaking in there. So we'd be projecting those guys. We for sure put Corey Joseph in, probably in like the low teens, and then we'd bring in I'd probably want to put Trey. How would you feel? Would you want to give Trace Jackson Davis like 6-7 minutes for the matchup? How would you play that?
Yeah, if Kuminga was out,
if they're both out,
probably. Yeah, if Kuminga and Clay, we're talking about if they're both out. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you probably get so thin that you need to. Looney's minutes probably just match Joe Val, maybe a little bit more than that, but they probably just match Joe Val. And then, good luck with whatever else you want to do. The backup center spot, like Sarge can handle against Nance and stuff. It's when they go to the Zion at center minutes that like, good luck with that. And that's where Trace might get a few minutes. Like it might be Trace as a sacrificial lamb in any Zion center minutes situation. That's kind of what I could see there. But they're very comfortable with Dario. We had a very low minutes projection on Dario yesterday, which I advocated for and was incorrect. Because we thought that Dre returning along with Looney would really cut Dario's role back. Mm-hmm. It didn't. It actually kind of cut more at the guards and the wings. They were very comfortable with Dario. And this was against a Houston team that's not particularly big. So I feel like they really are very comfortable with Dario just generally.
Yep.
Okay.
Paul loves him.
That will do it for this edition of Established Run's NBA Injury Report Analysis Show. As always, if you're interested in seeing more of our content, you can head on over to establishedrun.com, the subscribe tab, and check out information around our packages, the player props packages, which we highly encourage people to read the FAQ before potentially subscribing. But we're off to a very good start there, 29-11 through the first week of the season. The DFS package, the in-season DFS package, comes with Mike Gallagher's matchups column, which is out today, along with the live shows 5 days a week, top plays 6 times a week, projections for every single player, every game, updating consistently all through the night whenever there is news that requires changing those projections. And of course, access to our subscriber Discord as well, which contains a lot of useful conversation about lineup building strategy, so on and so forth. So if you are interested in joining us, check out the subscribe tab over on establishedrun.com for more details. If you enjoy the content that we are producing, we would ask you to press, hold down, gently touch that like button and potentially subscribe. You could even caress the subscribe button while pressing the like button for your pleasure. It helps us generate more views in the algorithm. It feeds the algorithm, helps us feed our families, and allows us to feed you the injury report analysis and information you need every Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. Nom, 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 nom. We will see you next time tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Take care, everybody.